Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I present a ministerial policy statement on the Territory's energy future. Madam Speaker, I rise to address the House on the absolute mess that our power system is in, left in a shambles by the former Labor government, and outline the 𝘛𝘦𝘳𝘳𝘪𝘵 CLP government's plan to secure our energy future. Madam Speaker, the Northern Territory is a place of extreme climates. Very hot days in some areas and very cold nights experienced in others. As a result, Territorians rely far more on cooling and heating than other parts of Australia, and the typical Territory family consumes more electricity than other Australian households. This ministerial statement today seeks to make it clear to Territorians the position Labor has left the Territory in and the steps through the actions we are taking to provide energy security, reliability and, most importantly, affordability. There are several entities responsible for the operation and the regulation of the Territory's electrical system and market, including 3 government-owned organisations or corporations. The first is Territory Generation, who is the main generator of electricity within our network. They make the power. Secondly, Power and Water Corporation are the main network provider, responsible for the electricity transmission infrastructure and the delivery of energy to remote communities. They get the power to your home or business. Lastly, 𝘵𝘳𝘳𝘪𝘵𝘳𝘺 Energy are the Territory's main energy retailer, responsible for buying electricity wholesale and selling to customers alongside private retailers. They send you the bills. Combined, Madam Speaker, the government's electricity entities currently hold $1.7 billion in debt, representing 20% of the total Territory's debt on the entity's balance sheet. This is a debt Territorians pay interest on, meaning there is less money to spend on improving the lives of Territorians. Collectively, they employ 1,236 people who are passionate Territorians committed to providing essential services to communities right throughout the Northern Territory, and they have too been let down by Labor's mismanagement. The Northern Territory Government supports affordable access to electricity for all Territorians, irrespective of where they live in the Territory. We do this through a uniform tariff on price policy, meaning that you pay the same per kilowatt hour electricity use regardless where you live or work. This is implemented throughout the Territory. The government sets the price to approximately 76,000 households and 13,000 small to medium-sized businesses across the Territory, so that Territorians pay less for the electricity than it costs to deliver it. The government partially subsidises Territorians' electricity bills. The difference between the real cost of electricity and the price Territorians pay is called the Community Service Obligation, or the CSO. The CSO subsidises electricity prices for Territorians by 11.5 cents per kilowatt hour. If the Northern Territory Government didn't do this, Territorians would be paying the highest power prices in the nation. This means the Territory Government pays approximately $1,200 per household and $2,200 per small business a year on top of what Territorians pay. Of course, all Territorian government money is Territorian money raised through taxes. This means in this financial year, the total subsidy to power prices is $134.6 million. This has grown by more than $37 million over 4 years, a 38% increase because Labor failed our electricity system and, as a result, condemned Territorians to pay more for power, either directly on their bill or through taxpayers' debt. Labor failed our electricity system in 3 key areas, Madam Speaker: not having a backup plan for the lack of gas, sitting on their hands as rooftop solar created grid instability, and failed to invest in new equipment and forcing the Territorians to rely on old generators that are at the end of life. Now I'll go into greater detail on all 3 of these areas. Labor failed to explain to Territorians that the offshore black tip gas field, which is currently meant to provide most of the gas used for generation has been failing since 2021. Blacktip has not been producing enough gas to keep the lights on. Labor failed to have a plan in place to deal with the shortfall, and their own onshore gas moratorium meant years of delay for an alternative energy source. What Labor did was purchase expensive export gas at exorbitant spot prices. Madam Speaker, things are so bad that Labor resorted to filling up the old diesel tanks out at Channel Island for a backup. A Labor government eager to spur its green credentials, filling up tanks of diesel ready to burn just to keep the lights on. Labor stand condemned for failing to do the work and relying on expensive spot gas for the last 4 years at the cost of $43 million to taxpayers for the 23-24 financial year alone, and resorting to diesel to keep the lights on in Darwin. A cheaper and more reliable gas supply like Beetaloo would have significantly reduced the cost of electricity to Territorians. Madam Speaker, on top of what is a pricing and reliability mess, Labor also failed to manage the integration of renewables into our electrical system, resulting in surges and blackouts. Again, they didn't do the work. Under Labor, there have been large-scale solar farms stopped from connecting to the grid for years and years because their connection would make the grid so unstable it would lead to surges and household blackouts. As of last year, many of the large-scale solar farms were limited to 25 to 75% output, or were not dispatching power at all. This has been slowly increasing this year as important grid stability comes online. Think about the waste, both financial and in the material that went into all these solar panels, sitting out there rusting in the fields, unable to provide renewable power for Territorians to use. Let alone the message this sends to business about investing in certainty and confidence. It has been a disaster. And it's not just about large-scale solar that Labor mismanaged. They failed to take the necessary action to accommodate the rapid build-up of household solar in the way that is still maintained system reliability and affordability. This was despite clear advice from experts and regulators of what needed to be done. Labor talked a great game about pushing their uncosted and unachievable 50% renewable energy by 2030 target. But like so many other things, Madam Speaker, Labor's actions never matched their words. As far back as 2017, in the early years of the Gunner Labor government, Territory Generation advised them that 50% renewables by 2030 target would not be reached without significant capital expenditure, and even then, the grid would be less stable. That's code for more blackouts for houses and big users being told to limit their power usage. You know what they did when they faced with the advice, Madam Speaker? They sacked the Board of Territory Generation that provided that advice and installed a compliant senior Labor staffer that would provide such an helpful advice to Labor ministers moving forward. And again in 2019, when large blackouts occurred in Alice Springs, after repeated warnings from the Utilities Commission in 2017 about the lengthy list of problems and the failure to manage the integrations of solar, they sacked the CE of Territory Generation and Power and Water. In 2019, the Gatton Institute again reminded them that the renewable energy target was unachievable, reminded them that the renewable energy target was achievable, provided the right stabilising technologies were deployed, supported by effective means of management systems. What did they do? Classic head in the sand policy from Labor when it comes to power, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, that is how the Territory ended up in a position we are in now. Despite Labor growing public debt of over $1 billion each and every year in office, they failed to make the necessary investment required in our electrical system to accommodate renewables. In short, Madam Speaker, Labor failed to ensure that electricity would be reliable and affordable for every Territorian. Which brings me to the third area of failure, Madam Speaker. Despite having $11 billion in debt, the Territory has equipment that is very old and reaching end of life. The electricity network, particularly in the Darwin-Katherine grid, is struggling with the volume of power generation being used by generated by household solar. This is because the Territory must run its big, inefficient generators all of the time, no matter how much solar is being added to the grid. The generators must keep spinning so that they can quickly take the place of household solar as power fluctuates when clouds interrupt the solar generation system. The effect is a costly, inefficient, unstable system resulting in potential blackouts. This is not a new or unique problem. Electricity grids the world over have grappled and had to adapt to the challenge of increasing solar penetration to varying degrees of cost and success. The real tragedy and the Labor's failing was that the Territory had the opportunity to learn from others and that have gone through these challenges before us. The relatively high proportion of tenants in our large urban centres in part form our historical transit workforce and our large footprint of government and community housing in our remote and regional communities meant rooftop solar uptake in the Northern Territory significantly lagged the rest of the nation and similar international competitors for a decade. And what did Labor do with the extra time they had to plan and prepare? Absolutely nothing, Madam Speaker. Labor neglected the maintenance and the upkeep of our critical energy infrastructure for years and failed to plan for the change in household production and consumption trends. Madam Speaker, these failings would have real-world impact. Beyond just higher cost electricity for Territorians, the Utilities Commission reports that Katherine endured over 500 minutes or 8 hours without power in the last financial year, and that our network performance continues to go down. This means more blackouts. In summary, we have high-cost electricity paid for by householders and taxpayers that is less and less reliable. Madam Speaker, it was important for our new government to outline the failures that we have inherited that, if left unchecked, and would spell disaster for everyday Territorians, our economy and our lifestyle. It is equally important that we outline what action the 𝘛𝘳𝘳𝘳𝘺 CLP government is taking to restore certainty and security to our electrical generation and supply. In 2018-19, the NT Electricity Outlook report by the Utilities Commission highlighted that achieving Labor's 50% renewable target by 2030 would require major investment and diverse technologies to maintain reliability. Madam Speaker, estimates now suggest a cost of up to $5 billion would be required to achieve Labor's renewable target of 50% by 2030. That equates to $56,000 for each of Jakarta's 88,800 household customers that would either need to be put on the bill or absorbed by an increase in the community service obligation, which is code for tax. That is what was coming under Labor, and they didn't want you to know about it. Madam Speaker, instead of penalising Territorians for Labor's mess, our government is putting Territorians first. We have formally advised government-owned corporations to stop advancing their 50% renewables target by 2030 capital expenditure and instead plan their future spending on achieving renewable and traditional mix of energy that delivers the lowest cost electricity to Territorians. Put simply, Madam Speaker, we are cancelling Labor's failed 50% renewables by 2030 target that was making power prices unaffordable and power less reliable. In addition to this, Madam Speaker, we will reform the electricity market to drive further efficiencies to limit cost increases. Madam Speaker, Territory households should not have to pay for Labor's failures and mismanagement of our electricity system. Territorians need certainty and security of power prices. That is why the 𝘛𝘳𝘳𝘳𝘺 CLP government has taken a responsible step and will cap electricity pricing order at 3% this year. Madam Speaker, the NT Treasury forecasts CPI will continue between 2 and 3% over coming years. The Northern Territory Government previously announced its public sector wage policy at a responsible 3%. Today's announcement means the cost Territorians' households will pay for power will be in line with inflation and public sector wage growth. Madam Speaker, today is the start, not the end, of a very important, honest conversation with Territorians. How we will deal with the challenges we have inherited from Labor, both in the electricity network and the gas industry, specifically means the need to consider yet further reform, and our government is not shying away from getting the work done. Work is underway on what the structure of the electricity market should look like moving forward to increase transparency, ensure reliability, and put downward pressure on cost growth. Work is also underway to look at what legislative and network settings may be needed in the future that shape unregulated solar input into our grid to ensure we can keep the lights on. It's too early to outline further plans yet, but let me be clear. Unlike those opposites, we will be honest and upfront with Territorians when reform is necessary and engage them in the debate. It must be stressed, while the challenges are very real, we will not sell our energy regulators, networks or retailers. Our first and last position is that householders, whether they have investment in solar or not, should not be put in a worse position as a result of Labor's failures. Ensuring a Territory First lens is run over all our future gas agreements and activity is another clear point of difference between this government and those opposite. Madam Speaker, it is shameful what we've had uncovered in the last 7 months, that Labor never wanted Territorians to know. Thank you, Madam Speaker.